Ever wondered how two countries, allies during the Second World War, could suddenly become the fiercest of enemies? To understand this, we need to travel back in time to the aftermath of the Second World War. The world had been torn apart, and from the ashes rose two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. These two nations, though allies during the war, had fundamentally different ideologies. On one hand, we had the United States, a champion of capitalism and liberal democracy. On the other hand, we had the Soviet Union, a beacon of communism and state-controlled economy. It was a clash of ideologies, a battle for supremacy, and a race to shape the post-war world. Europe, once a thriving continent, was now divided into Eastern and Western blocs. The Iron Curtain, as Winston Churchill famously called it, separated the capitalist West from the communist East. This division wasn't just physical, it was ideological, political, and economic. It was a chasm that seemed too vast to bridge. As tensions escalated, strategies were devised. The United States, under President Harry Truman, formulated the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. These were aimed at containing the spread of communism, providing financial aid to war-torn countries, and strengthening democratic governments across Europe. In response to these American initiatives, the Soviet Union formed the Warsaw Pact in 1955, creating a powerful military alliance with other communist nations in Eastern Europe. A year earlier, the United States and its Western allies had formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, a similar alliance aimed at countering Soviet aggression. As these alliances formed, the world watched nervously. The stage was set. The actors were in place. It was a standoff between two superpowers, each with its sphere of influence, each with its ideology, and each with an unwavering belief in its own superiority. And so the stage was set for a global standoff unlike any the world had seen before. It was a race, but unlike any other. The prize, the power to annihilate. As the Cold War dawned, a new kind of competition emerged, one that would change the course of history and cast a long, ominous shadow over the world. This was the nuclear arms race, a deadly contest of technological prowess and raw power. The United States and the Soviet Union, the two superpowers left standing in the aftermath of World War II, found themselves caught in a chilling cycle of escalation. Each side was driven to outdo the other, developing more destructive weapons, more advanced missile systems, and more sophisticated nuclear technologies. The stakes were unimaginably high, and the potential for catastrophe loomed large. In this high-stakes game, a chilling concept emerged: mutually assured destruction, or MAD. This was the idea that if either the United States or the Soviet Union launched a nuclear attack, the other would retaliate, leading to the total annihilation of both. It was a grim form of deterrence, a paradoxical assurance that the very destructiveness of these weapons would prevent their use. But there were moments when this precarious balance teetered on the edge. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 was one such moment, a terrifyingly real confrontation that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. For 13 tense days, the world watched, waited, and hoped for a peaceful resolution. In this deadly game of brinkmanship, the world held its breath. The battle lines of the Cold War were drawn across the globe. As the United States and the Soviet Union vied for supremacy, their ideological clash played out in numerous countries, often with devastating effects on local populations. Let's consider the Korean War, a conflict that erupted just 5 years after World War II. The Korean Peninsula became a chessboard, with the North backed by the Soviets and the South supported by the Americans. The war ended in a stalemate, with the peninsula divided along the 38th parallel, a division that continues to this day. Then came the Vietnam War. The United States, fearing the spread of communism, intervened in a civil war between North and South Vietnam. Despite massive American military involvement, the North eventually prevailed, uniting the country under communist rule. The war took a heavy toll on the Vietnamese population and left the country deeply scarred. Lastly, let's not overlook the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The Soviets, hoping to prop up a communist government, found themselves mired in a costly and protracted conflict. The United States, in a bid to thwart Soviet ambitions, supported the Afghan resistance, setting the stage for decades of instability in the region. In these far-flung battlefields, the superpowers waged war by proxy. The Cold War was not just fought with guns and bombs, but also with ideas and innovation. As tensions simmered, a different kind of race was taking place, one that transcended the traditional battlefield, the space race. This race was not just about reaching the moon, it was a demonstration of technological prowess and a testament to national pride. The launch of the Soviet satellite Sputnik in 1957 served as a wake-up call to the United States, sparking a fierce competition that culminated in the Apollo moon landing in 1969. But this wasn't the only front where the battle was being waged. The Cold War was also a war of ideologies, a war fought not with bullets, but with words and images. Propaganda became a powerful weapon, wielded by both sides to shape public opinion. The United States promoted the virtues of capitalism and democracy, while the Soviet Union extolled the benefits of communism and a planned economy. Cinema, literature, music, and even sports became arenas for this ideological clash. Each side sought to prove its superiority, not just in military strength but also in cultural and technological achievements. The battle lines were drawn, not just on maps, but in the minds and hearts of people around the world. In a world divided, culture and technology became tools of influence and power. Every winter, no matter how long and harsh, eventually gives way to spring. And so it was with the Cold War. As the 1980s dawned, a thaw began to creep into the icy standoff that had defined global politics for decades. Two men emerged as the architects of this new season: the Soviet Union's last leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, and the United States' 40th President, Ronald Reagan. Gorbachev, with his policies of glasnost and perestroika, sought to bring transparency and reform to the Soviet Union. Reagan, on the other hand, pursued a policy of peace through strength, backing his diplomatic overtures with a robust military presence. Their combined efforts culminated in a series of summits that gradually eased tensions between the two superpowers. Yet, the most symbolic manifestation of this thaw came not from these leaders, but from the people. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, that concrete and barbed wire embodiment of Cold War division, was brought down not by tanks or bombs, but by sledgehammers and chisels in the hands of ordinary citizens. 2 years later, the Soviet Union itself dissolved, marking the official end of the Cold War. The world watched as the iron fist of communism unclenched, and countries once held in its grasp emerged into the daylight of independence. As the wall fell, so too did the curtain on this chapter of global history. The echoes of the Cold War continue to reverberate in our world today. The ideological clash between capitalism and communism, the nuclear arms race, proxy wars, and the battle of culture and technology have all left indelible imprints. These elements shaped our geopolitics and global relations, leaving a legacy that still influences contemporary events. As we look back on this era, we are reminded of the price of ideological conflict and the value of peace and cooperation.